The Drakonid and the Dragonspawn are the devoted, humanoid-ish soldiers of the various dragonflights. They are hinted and stated to be humanoids who choose to devote themselves to the dragonflights and are transformed into dragonkin either through a process or gradually over time. Quote, the unintended side effect of hanging out with dragons. The now non-canon RPG books also implied that the Dragonspawn specifically reproduce naturally as well to create more Dragonspawn, but that has never been seen or mentioned in canon lore. Except for a few cases I'll talk about later, it's unknown generally speaking how exactly the process works. I personally believe that it can have something to do with dragon blood. I'm stating this because the Black Drakonid Creed, who came to rule a group of Gilnean humans in Worgen, infected his followers with his own draconic blood, which both enhanced their physical capabilities and unwittingly kept them loyal. Though, if this method, which a Hearthstone developer called Icky Blood Rituals, is actually true, it's a very slow one requiring constant infusions over time, and if they stop, it can kill the mortal as it works its way out of their system. Regardless, generally speaking, the Drakonid and the Dragonspawn also somewhat borrow the skills and the attributes of the flight they are loyal to. Most notably, for instance in canon lore, blue dragonkin are often adept magic users. Similarly, the chromatic ones borrow powers from all of the dragonflights. Also, as a fun side note, a black dragonspawn is the only example in the lore where a dragonspawn, Cyrus Ferrepentuous, has threatened to eat a mortal. Of the two, the Dragonspawn are by far more common than the Drakonid, and though not always, the Drakonid generally occupy superior hierarchical positions and are considered to be more powerful. Originally, because of their rarity, the lore community generally believed that the Drakonids were a recent creation, the result of Nefarian's experiments in Blackrock Mountain, since in classic World of Warcraft the Drakonid could only be found there, while Dragonspawn were far more common. This was quickly proven to not be the case as early as Burning Crusade, when Infinite Dragon and Nether Dragon Drakonids were found, as well as Black Drakonid not related to Nefarian. Though, indeed, even in more recent lore, while Drakonid can now be found among all of the dragonflights, they are by far the most common among the Black Dragonflight. For instance, there are only a small handful of green dragon Drakonid, and only one named one, while black Drakonids show up almost everywhere the Black Dragonflight had a presence. The artificially created dragonflights, the Twilight and Chromatic ones, also have Drakonid and Dragonspawn of their own colors and powers. The process for creating these, though, seems to be more unstable and dangerous than for the main 5 dragonflights, as many of Nefarian's failed and deceased experiments can attest. For the Twilight Drakonid and Dragonspawn specifically, there seems to be 3 methods one can use to create them. The first method is slight speculation on my part based on their titles and abilities, but seems to imply that you corrupt dragonkin from the other dragonflights. Though this seems to be an incomplete process, since those corrupted Drakonid and Dragonspawn, who bear names such as Azureborn for the blues or Crimsonborn for the reds, only seem capable of using their original flight's abilities. The second process is to infuse mortals, typically Twilight's Hammer cultists, with the essence of Nether dragons, since they were instrumental in the creation of Twilight dragons. This particular one seems to be the most common type for the Cataclysm era Drakonid and Dragonspawn. The third method has only been shown in very recent times, and involves twisting, presumably mortals, using the magic of the Void. While their stereotypical characteristic is their usual, though not always so, loyalty towards their respective dragonflight, the Drakonid and the Dragonspawn are not strictly subservient and inferior to their dragon rulers. Indeed, there have been plenty of cases where a Drakonid or Dragonspawn commander has had young whelps and drakes under his command. And fairly often they are assigned to guard the most important asset of the dragonflights, their eggs and their young. Most often, the blue dragonflight seems to give the most importance and respect to the Drakonid and Dragonspawn. For instance, the Dragonspawn Dracos was the Nexus's jailer, even responsible for torturing the drakes of other flights. General Cerulean and Warbringer Gordrak were both called, quote, Malagos's most trusted underlings, end quote. And the Dragonspawn Goramash was directly responsible for negotiating on behalf of the Blues with the Ethereum. By contrast, the Black Drakonid and Dragonspawn can be treated cruelly by the rest of their flight, though they are still somewhat respected, and the cruelty is usually a sign of trust and responsibility placed upon them. Interestingly and paradoxically enough, the Black Drakonid and Dragonspawn, at least according to a small handful of classic quests, are also generally honorable. The spirit of Lord Valfalak, for instance, promises not to harm the player as thanks for returning an artifact that was stolen from him, and Emberstrife, the drake responsible for selecting Onyxia's guard, encourages his trainees to, quote, bring honor to the Black Flight. They also, at least according to Emberstrife, seem to genuinely believe that they are the good guys, and that the other dragonflights, Alexstrasza especially, betrayed and hound the Black Dragonflight for no good reason. On the other end of the spectrum, in comparison to the Blues at least, are the Infinite Drakonid and presumably Dragonspawn, who are said to live a life of only, quote, servitude and despair. Interestingly enough, and perhaps uncharacteristically of the Drakonid and Dragonspawn, it's been stated that the Infinite Dragonflight obtained the aid of so many by promising them power. Still, despite their harsh treatment, it is possible, though very rare, to gain influence within the Infinite Dragonflight as a Drakonid, such as, for instance, Chronoloord Deja has, through, quote, raw power and cunning. Canonically, Neferion's experiments did result in the creation of a half-humanoid, half-dragon race, just not the Drakonid, the Dragonmen. The most infamous example is Maloriak, once a bright young human alchemist, kidnapped by Neferion and fused with the corpse of a Dragonspawn. The result was, as the adventure guide calls him, a bumbling minion, or as Neferion calls him, a stupid, incompetent and disappointing minion. At any rate, he lost much of his former intelligence. Maloriak specifically has created even greater failures of Dragonmen, the Aberrations. Despite this experiment's failure though, Dragonmen have occasionally appeared since alongside the Black Dragonflight, and one of them, Kyrak, allied with the Iron Horde, also proved himself to be very cunning and intelligent.